There is a phone call that comes into every woman's life that is designed to break her. Mine came on a Tuesday morning in October. My son's voice on the other end. Calm, almost bored. Telling me he had taken my savings, sold my property, and was getting married the next day. He was waiting for me to fall apart. I didn't. And that is where the story really begins. My name is Adeyes Mensah Ose. I am 63 years old. I live at 412 Birchwood Lane in Dayton, Ohio, in a house I have kept standing through 21 years of widowhood, school runs, burst pipes, and quiet loneliness that nobody ever sees because I don't wear it on my face. People who know me from Millbrook Public Library see a woman who shelves books, recommends novels, and brings jollof rice to the December potluck without fail. They see someone gentle, unhurried, a little invisible in the way that older women sometimes become invisible without anyone meaning for it to happen. What they don't see is that before my son was born, I spent 11 years as a paralegal at Caldwell, Riggs & Associates in Cincinnati. Elder law, financial fraud. I sat across tables from people who stole from their own families and learned to spot every move they made before they made it. I left that career to raise Kofi, but I never left behind what it taught me. My husband Kwame died in March 2002, a highway accident that took him at 50 and left me at 41 with a 13-year-old boy and a silence in the house so heavy I could feel it pressing against the walls. People said, "At least you have your son." I held that close for 20 years like it was the most precious thing I owned. I should have held it more carefully. 8 months ago, Kofi called to say he had lost his job in Columbus. Finance sector. Restructuring. He sounded smaller on the phone than I had ever heard him sound, and without thinking twice, I told him to come home. He moved back into his childhood bedroom in April. I cooked his favorite meals. I gave him space. I told myself this was what mothers do. You hold the door open, always, no matter how old they get. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal, warm even. Then I started noticing things. A folder on my desk moved to the wrong side. A drawer in my home office left slightly open when I always close it completely. My filing cabinet, the one with the property deeds, the insurance documents, the trust papers, sitting at an angle that told me someone had pulled it out and pushed it back in a hurry. Small things. The kind of things you could easily talk yourself out of believing. I didn't talk myself out of it. I noted every single one in a small notebook I keep in my cardigan pocket. Date, time, what I observed. Old paralegal habit. You document first and draw conclusions later. In June, Kofi brought Zuri Addo home for the first time. 28 years old, warm smile, careful manners, called me Ma from the very first evening. She brought chin chin in a paper bag and complimented my curtains and laughed easily at everything Kofi said. But I watched her eyes. They never settled. They moved across every room like she was taking inventory. The furniture, the artwork, the square footage, the bones of the house itself. The smile never stopped, but the eyes were always working. One evening she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said very casually, "Ma, a house like this in this neighborhood must be worth something serious these days. Have you thought about what you want to do with it eventually?" I looked at her for a moment. I plan to live in it, I said. She laughed like I had made a joke. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I came home from the library earlier than expected. I heard voices from my home office. I stood in the hallway and listened before I made a sound. Kofi and Zuri. The filing cabinet open. Papers being lifted and replaced. Zuri's voice low and focused. Is this the one? Is this the property deed? What about the savings account statements? I walked in. They both looked up. Kofi laughed immediately. Mama, Zuri was just asking about the house insurance I was trying to find. Close it, I said quietly. He closed the cabinet. Nobody said another word about it. But something settled in me that afternoon, like a stone dropping to the bottom of still water. Quiet. Final. Certain. I went to my bedroom, took out my notebook, and wrote down everything I had just seen, because I already knew. This was not the end of something. This was the beginning. That night, Kofi knocked on my bedroom door, apologized easily, blamed curiosity, kissed my cheek, and went to bed like nothing had happened. I lay awake listening to the house settle around me. 3 weeks later, I would be in a hospital bed with a fever so high I couldn't remember my own name. And Kofi would be standing over me with papers and a pen. I find out what I signed. And I find out what it cost me. I have always been the kind of woman who pushes through. Kofi used to tease me about it when he was small. Mama, you could have a broken leg and still make it to work. He wasn't entirely wrong. I don't stop easily. I don't ask for help easily. And I certainly don't let people see me when I am at my lowest. So when the pneumonia hit in early September, it caught me completely off guard. It started as what I thought was a stubborn cold. By the second day, I couldn't get out of bed. By the third day, my neighbor Yatunde found me on the kitchen floor trying to reach my phone and called an ambulance herself. 4 days at Mercy General Hospital. Fever peaking at 104. There were hours in those 4 days where the world was nothing but heat and noise and faces I couldn't quite hold on to. Kofi came the first morning. He walked in with a container of pepper soup from the restaurant on 5th Street that I have always loved, pulled a chair close to my bed, and sat with me for 3 hours. He was tender in a way he hadn't been since he was a boy, fixing my pillow, asking the nurses questions, holding my hand when the fever spiked. I remember thinking, this is my son. This is who he really is underneath everything. I held on to that thought the way a drowning woman holds on to anything within reach. On the 3rd day, the fever was at its worst. I know this because I have pieced it together from the hospital records I requested later. At the time, I was barely present. The room kept tilting. Voices came from very far away. At some point, Kofi was beside me with papers. Mama, these are just discharge forms, standard paperwork. I need you to sign so we can start planning to get you home. I remember the pen in my hand. I remember the shape of his face above me, soft and reassuring. I remember trying to focus on the page and the words sliding away from me like water. I signed. 3 times. Maybe 4. I don't remember. I came home on a Wednesday. Kofi had cleaned the house, stocked the fridge, and left a pot of soup on the stove. For 2 weeks he checked in every day, brought groceries, fixed a leaking tap I had been meaning to call someone about for months. He was so present, so warm, so careful. I see now what that was. It was a man making sure the woman he had just stolen from didn't look too closely at anything until the transfers were complete. 6 weeks after I came home from hospital, I sat down at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning with my coffee and opened my banking app the way I do every single week without fail. My savings account opened on the screen. I stared at it for a long time. 1,000. I refreshed the page. The number didn't move. I went to the transaction history with hands that had gone completely still. 3 transfers over 4 days. $50,000. 50,000. October 15th, 45,000. October 16th, 36,000. All authorized. All processed without a flag. All linked to a power of attorney document dated the day I was lying in that hospital bed, barely able to hold a pen. I sat at that table without moving for a very long time. Then my phone rang. Kofi's name on the screen. I answered. Mama. His voice was light, almost cheerful. I have some news. Zuri and I are getting married tomorrow. Small ceremony, nothing big. I just wanted you to hear it from me. The room was very quiet. Kofi, I said, my savings account. A pause. Brief. Practiced. Mama, I needed capital to get back on my feet. You have your pension. You'll be fine. And listen. I also had to make a decision about Elmwood Court. I found a buyer. Good price. You needed to let that property go anyway. He had sold my rental property, the one with tenants, the one with 18 months left on a valid lease. Sold it without my knowledge, using documents I signed while I was too sick to know my own name. I put the phone down without saying another word, and I sat in that kitchen in the silence of everything I had just lost. But here is the thing about a woman who has spent 11 years building fraud cases from the ground up. I wasn't thinking about what he had taken. I was already thinking about what I was going to do next. I opened my laptop, created a new document, typed 4 words at the top of the page: timeline of financial fraud. Because Kofi had made one mistake that he didn't know about yet. The property he sold, 903 Elmwood Court, was not in my name alone. It was in a trust. I make 5 phone calls, and I start building something my son never saw coming. I have a filing cabinet in my home office that I have maintained for 31 years. Every document inside it is labeled. Every folder is dated. Every property deed, insurance policy, lease agreement, and bank statement has its own place and has never once been misplaced. Kwame used to laugh at me for it. Adais, you file everything like the whole world is going to court one day. I used to laugh back. I wasn't laughing now, but I was grateful. I pulled out the property files first. 2 folders. 412. Birchwood Lane, held in the Kwame and Adayaze Osei Family Trust, established 2004. 910-3. Elmwood Court, registered in my name, Adayaze Mensa Osei, with a sitting tenancy agreement signed, July 2022. Current lease running through January 2026. Monthly rent. Tenant, Blessing Ize. Kofi had sold a property with a valid sitting tenant without disclosing the lease. He had used a power of attorney I signed while I had a fever of 104 degrees to authorize a transaction that would not survive 30 minutes of legal scrutiny. I sat with those folders open on my kitchen table and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not grief. Something colder and more useful than either. Clarity. I made 5 phone calls that morning. The first was to my credit union. I spoke to a woman named Grace, who listened carefully and did not once make me feel like a foolish old woman who had been taken advantage of. She flagged the transactions immediately, opened a fraud investigation, and promised me complete records within 48 hours. The second call was to Solomon Ibarra. Solomon and I worked together at Caldwell Riggs 25 years ago. He is now a criminal attorney with an office on Commerce Street, and he owes me more than one favor for more than one case we built together back when we were both younger and hungrier. I told him everything in 11 minutes. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, a daze. He handed you 3 felonies on a plate. Come in tomorrow morning. The third call was to Blessing Eze at 903 Elmwood Court. I told her calmly that my son had attempted to sell her home without my authorization, and that her lease was valid, protected, and going nowhere. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Ose, what do you need from me?" I told her I might need a witness statement. She said, "Just say the word." The fourth call was to my bank to freeze all remaining accounts from further external access. The fifth call was to Yatunde. "Come over," I said. "Bring your reading glasses. I need a second pair of hands." She was at my door in 20 minutes with her glasses and a bottle of red wine, and the particular expression she reserves for situations that require both. We spent 4 hours at my kitchen table. Yatunde sorted and copied while I organized everything into 3 identical sets, one for Solomon, one for the police, one locked in my cabinet. Bank statements, the lease agreement, both property deeds. The hospital records showing my fever and the dates. By the time she left, it was past midnight. I had the cleanest fraud case I had ever seen built against anyone, and I had built it against my own son. 2 days later, Kofi called to remind me about the wedding. "Mama, the ceremony is Saturday. I want you there. Dress nicely." I said I would come. The wedding was held at the Riverside Hall on Elm Street. White flowers, champagne, a 4-piece band. Everything paid for with money that had sat in my savings account for 20 years since the morning I buried Kwame. I wore my navy dress. I sat in the front row. I smiled at the right moments and greeted people warmly. And when Zuri walked down the aisle, I clapped with everyone else. Kofi found me during the reception. He hugged me and said, "Mama, I knew you'd understand. This is a fresh start for all of us." I looked at my son's face, open, happy, completely certain he had gotten away with everything. "You look so happy, Kofi," I said. "Enjoy today." I meant every word. Driving home that evening, I checked my phone. A message from Solomon. "Fraud report filed. Police investigation opened. Notary seal traced. She was in Atlanta on the day you supposedly signed. We have him." I put my phone in my bag and drove home through the dark, quiet streets of Dayton. That same night, Kofi sent a message. "Mama, thank you for coming. It meant everything. Love you." I read it twice. Then I put my phone face down on the nightstand and closed my eyes. He had no idea that while he was cutting his wedding cake, the ground beneath everything he had built had already begun to give way. Detective Amara Diallo was not what I expected. She was younger than me by about 15 years, quiet in the way of someone who has learned that silence pulls more truth out of people than questions do. She sat across from me in my kitchen on a Wednesday morning with a notepad and listened to everything I said without once interrupting or looking at me with that particular expression. People reserve for older women who have been fooled by their own children. She just listened and wrote, and when I finished, she looked up and said, "Mrs. Osei, this is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I have seen come across my desk. You did our job for us." I told her I had some experience with that. She filed the full report before she left my house. Kofi came 4 days later. He didn't knock. He still had a key from when he lived here, and he used it without hesitation. Walking into my sitting room at 7 in the evening with Zuri behind him and an expression on his face I had never seen before. Not the warm, easy Kofi. Not the apologetic Kofi. Something harder and stranger that sat on his face like a mask that didn't quite fit. "Mama, you need to stop this." He stood in the middle of my sitting room with his hands open at his sides. "Call the detective. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. Tell her you authorized everything." "I was in a hospital bed with a fever of 104, I said. "You signed the papers. I signed what you put in front of me when I didn't know my own name." Zuri stepped forward. Her voice was very controlled. "Adayez, you are 63 years old. You live alone. Do you understand how easy it would be for people to start questioning whether you can manage your own affairs? We have a lawyer. We can make this very complicated for you." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked at my son. This stranger standing in the house his father built a life in, threatening the woman his father loved, with the woman his father died saving standing beside him. He didn't know that part yet. Neither did she. "Get out of my house," I said. "Both of you. Now." They left. I sat in my sitting room in the dark for a long time after their car pulled away. Not crying. Just sitting with the weight of what my son had become and what I was going to have to do about it. Then I called Solomon and told him to press full charges. The letter came 3 days later. Handwritten, cream envelope. The return address said, Atlanta, Georgia. The name on the back, Abina Addo, Zuri's mother. I almost didn't open it. I'm glad I did, and I wish I hadn't. Both of those things are true at the same time. Dear Mrs. Osei, I have started this letter 14 times over the past 3 weeks and thrown every version away. I am writing it now because I believe you deserve the truth, even if the truth makes everything harder. 21 years ago on a March evening, I was driving on Interstate 75 with my 18-month-old daughter Zuri in the back seat. I lost control on a patch of ice. My car spun into oncoming traffic. The car coming toward us swerved, not away from us, toward us, deliberately taking the impact to push us out of the path of a truck that would have killed us both. The driver of that car died at the scene. His name was Kwame Osei. I have lived with this every single day for 21 years. When Zuri began dating a man named Kofi Osei 2 years ago, I felt the ground move beneath me. I said nothing to Zuri. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself God was giving me a way to repay what your husband gave us. I encouraged their relationship. I told Zuri that Kofi's family were good people who deserved support. I never told her why I believed that. I never told her what her life cost. I am so sorry. I am so deeply sorry for what has been done to you. Abena Ado. I read that letter 4 times at my kitchen table. Kwame had died saving Zuri. The woman who sat in my sitting room and threatened me with lawyers and dementia accusations was alive because my husband had chosen in a split second to spend his life protecting hers. I sat with that until midnight. The grief that came was different from any grief I had felt before. Not sharp, not loud, just enormous and quiet like a sky with no stars in it. By the time I went to bed, I had made a decision, not about the charges, those were staying, but about Abena Addo and about what Kwame's sacrifice actually meant for what happened next. Because the courtroom was 3 weeks away, and I had one more thing to do before I walked through those doors, I called Abena Addo the morning after I read her letter. She answered on the second ring like she had been waiting beside the phone. We met 2 days later at a coffee shop on Sycamore Street, 3 blocks from the library where I spend my quiet days recommending novels to people whose lives are less complicated than mine. She was a small woman, silver locks, hands that wouldn't stay still on the table. She started to apologize the moment she sat down. I stopped her. I don't need an apology from you, I said. What your daughter and my son did, that was their choice, not yours. You didn't steal from me. You didn't forge my name. You just loved your child and made decisions you thought were right. She looked at me like I had said something she hadn't prepared herself to hear. Your husband saved my daughter's life, she said quietly. I know, I said. And I have spent 3 days being angry about that, about the unfairness of it, about the fact that Kwame died, giving Zuri a life she used to help destroy mine. I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup. But Kwame didn't save her so that I could spend the rest of my life being bitter about it. That's not who he was, and I refused to let what Kofi did turn me into someone Kwame wouldn't recognize. Abena covered her mouth with her hand. Her shoulders shook once. We sat there together for a long time without saying anything else. 2 women held together by a man neither of us would ever stop grieving. The courtroom was 3 weeks later. Franklin County. Judge Nana Asante presiding. Solomon sat beside me. Detective Diallo was there. Blessing Easy sat 3 rows back. Yatund held my hand until the proceedings began and then let go when she saw I didn't need it anymore. Kofi sat at the defendant's table in a suit that was slightly too big for him now. He had lost weight. When his eyes found mine across the room, he looked away first. Solomon presented the case with the quiet efficiency of a man who has been doing this for 30 years. Bank records, the forged power of attorney, the hospital records showing my fever, the notary's credit card placing her in Atlanta on the day I supposedly signed, the lease agreement Kofi had hidden from the property buyer. Every document clean, dated, and undeniable. The prosecutor called it one of the most clear-cut cases of elder financial abuse she had presented in 15 years on the bench. Then, Judge Asante asked if I wished to make a statement. I stood. I did not look at Kofi when I spoke. I looked at the judge. My son did not steal from a stranger, I said. He stole from the woman who held his hand through every hard thing life gave him. He used my love for him as the door he walked through to take everything I had built. I am not here for revenge. I am here because accountability is not cruelty. It is the only thing that gives any of this a chance of meaning something. I want my money returned. I want my son to face what he has done, and I want him to become, eventually, if he is willing to do the work, the man his father raised him to be. I sat down. The courtroom was very quiet. Kofi took the stand and spoke for 20 minutes. The debts he had hidden, the pressure he had felt, the cascade of bad decisions that each made the next one feel inevitable. His voice broke twice. He did not ask for mercy. He asked only for the chance to make it right. Zuri was not in the courtroom. She had filed for annulment the week before. 6 weeks of marriage, over before it had properly begun. Judge Asante sentenced Kofi to 20 months in Franklin County, full restitution of $131,000 to be paid over 10 years, 5 years supervised probation, and mandatory financial ethics counseling. She looked at him over her glasses before she closed the file. Mr. Osei, your mother showed you more grace today than you deserve. Don't waste it. Time moves differently after something like this. The first months were the hardest. The house felt too quiet in a new way, not the quiet of widowhood which I had learned to live inside. A different quiet, the quiet of a chapter that has ended without a clean resolution. I threw myself into work, into Yetunde's company, into the garden at Birchwood Lane that Kwame had planted and I had maintained for 21 years without ever fully making it my own. I made it my own now. 14 months later, I was sitting on my back porch on a Saturday morning when Yetunde brought out 2 cups of tea and an envelope. This came yesterday. I forgot to give it to you, Kofi's handwriting. I opened it slowly. It was 1 page. No excuses, no requests. Just a man writing to his mother from a place of genuine reckoning with who he had been and who he was trying to become. He was 6 months into a counseling program. He had started paying the restitution from his prison job, small amounts, but consistent. He wrote, I don't expect forgiveness, Mama. I just want you to know I understand now what I took from you. Not the money. You. I folded the letter and held it in both hands. Yetunde sat beside me, and we drank our tea and watched the garden in the morning light. Are you all right? She asked. I thought about Kwame, about the woman he died saving, about the son I had loved imperfectly and been betrayed by completely, about the garden, about the filing cabinet that had saved me, about the woman people see at Millbrook Library in her cardigan recommending novels, about the woman she has no idea is standing inside that woman. Yes, I said, I think I finally am. This is not a story about a perfect ending. It is a story about a woman who refused to be what someone else's greed tried to make her. Broken, grateful, still standing. That is enough. That has always been enough. Has your own family ever made you feel like you were the problem? For simply demanding to be treated with dignity? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if Adia's story moved you today, subscribe. Because next week I have a story that will stop you mid-breath.